Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Let the Data Speak, How to Predict When the Increase in Personal Bankruptcy Filings Will Hit. One thing that we always like to say at Acumen Legal Marketing is we are a very, very data-driven company. I believe that all of your marketing decisions need to be driven by data. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people will do many things, right? We'll run Google ads, we'll run Facebook ads, we'll focus on our SEO, all these different channels, whether it be billboards, whatever we're doing. But a lot of times we don't measure that, right? So we always find that it's extremely important to measure that, because by measuring it, we're going to know where we should allocate our spend and what we should do. So my partner Pete and I, who's co-presenting this call today, we started talking about it, and we're like, how can we use the data to our advantage in other ways? How can we look at trends that have happened in the past as it relates to bankruptcy? Because we all know that there is a big wave of bankruptcy filings that's going to hit. It's just a matter of when, and how can we use the data to our advantage to predict that? So Pete and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, pulling from different sources, looking at different trends, and we feel that we put together a pretty predictable way to take a look at this and leading indicators that we can use that will allow us to actually predict when this wave's going to hit. So with that, I'd like to introduce my partner Pete Mansman, who's going to take the first portion of the webinar here and really dive into some of the data that we're seeing. And then after that, I'm going to dive into a little bit on what we feel that you can be doing right now to best position yourself for when this is coming. And then for everyone that stays on, there's going to be a little special offer at the end of the webinar. We think that's going to be really valuable to you and you'll benefit from. So again, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We'll try to do our best to keep this within the hour, and there will be a recording of this that will be sent to everybody. So if you have to jump off for a few minutes, no worries. We'll make sure that you get the recording. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Pete.
All right. Thank you, Sean, and afternoon, everybody. So Acumen has a number of bankruptcy clients that we help in their marketing efforts in a lot of different ways. And in our dealings with them and our relationships with them, the big question since March of last year has been, this is going to be great for the bankruptcy industry. We're going to have all kinds of filings. The tsunami wave is going to be coming at the end of the spring in 2020. And then at the end of the spring in 2020, it's coming in the summer. It's coming in the fall. It's coming in 2021. It hasn't happened yet. And I think there's a certain level of worry is it going to happen? And if it is going to happen, when's this coming? What does this all mean? And, it's anybody's guess. We're in unprecedented times and governmental programs and all those different things that have certainly been important for our country and have certainly held off a lot of the bankruptcy filings that otherwise would have happened. But I think there's some history, as Sean mentioned earlier, and looking at some of the data will give us some idea of what to expect moving forward. And so, Sean, if we can go to the next slide here. One of the first things we wanted to look at was what are, bankruptcy trends recently, historically, and what does that look like? What does this marketplace look like if you take the entire United States and look at filings across them? What is it that we can anticipate or read into how stable of a marketplace this is in terms of number of filings? So one of the first things we want to look at is I went to the uscourts.gov website, which maintains all kinds of data related to various filings across federal jurisdictions, bankruptcies included. And they put out a quarterly report, and quarterly they summarize, what's happened and different variances, and you can get into some real detailed information. But what's important here is that, we focused on individual bankruptcy trends. We weren't worried about businesses at this point. We wanted to look at what individuals had been doing, and then really honed in on Chapter 7s and 13s. So this slide is showing the number of filings in 2018 and 2019. And Chapter 11s are included in the total filings, but overall, if you use 2018 as an example, there's only 1,000 of them. So it's a small number, so we really would spend much time analyzing those. But what's important when you look at up to pre-pandemic, and we're looking at the 2 years coming into 2020, look how stable this marketplace is in terms of the number of filings. There's less than a 1.1% variance across any of these numbers. I mean, it's amazingly consistent numbers in the years leading up to 2020. And as expected, you have more Chapter 7s than 13s. But again, you look at the variance in the numbers, it's very close. And so heading into 2020, we had a fairly predictable number of bankruptcy filings over any course of time that you could look at and say, all right, this is our marketplace. These are the potential people who are going to hire bankruptcy attorneys to help them navigate through this process. So then we jump into 2020. If we can just go to the next slide here. So in 2020, total number of filings for the year were 522,000 compared to 752,000 the year before. And you'll see that disproportionately that the number of filings that took the bigger hit are the 13s, and that's understandable. There were a lot of programs out there through the CARES Acts and otherwise that were focused on forbearance and eviction moratoriums and foreclosure moratoriums. And then we look at 2021. And so I only have the first quarter's worth of data at this point. I will have some more data after June of this year. But if you annualized out the data in the first quarter of 2021, you'll see that the filings again are showing a drop of 423,000 from 522 in 2020 and from a 752,000, what I would consider a normal number from 2018 and 2019. So, you look at this and you say, all right, well, why is this? Is this because less people are in need of bankruptcy services overall, that the economy, the strength of the country is in such a place, or that people's financial positions are in such a place that they don't need bankruptcy services? I don't think that's the case. I think what we have is the trigger points that traditionally force people into deciding whether or not they're going to have to file for bankruptcy or not. Just have not happened yet. And I'll talk about what some of those are and when we can anticipate them coming. So, it begs the question, if we look at this and say, all right, well, if 2020 were a normal year and we would have 750,000 or approximately filings in a year, we have 230,000 that are waiting in the wings of people who, if they were in that position where they needed to consider bankruptcy filing in 2020, are we to believe that they are in better financial position today than they were then? Maybe, but I don't think so. I think that they just haven't had those trigger points to actually force them into filing at this point. And now we're almost halfway through 2021, and we're seeing the same thing. Are these people who are waiting in the wings? So even if you question whether or not the financial state of the country or people's personal finances, because of so much stimulus money and packages, has put them in a better financial position, I don't think you can ignore that there were a lot of people who didn't file that otherwise would have had to have filed, that even with the stimulus programs and packages that we've had in the last number of years, wouldn't have changed their position so drastically that they, suddenly aren't going to need bankruptcy protection. I think they're waiting in the wings. And again, triggering points haven't happened yet because of all these moratoriums and governmental programs, but they're coming. So if we look at the next slide, we can see that 2021 saw an overall drop in filings of 31.5%, and Chapter 13s had the highest drop of 46.3% compared to 7s at 20.9%. So again, weighted heavier on 13s over 7s, which makes sense with as many programs that were designed to keep people in their houses. I also would want to point out that 2020 numbers overall, I would consider to be inflated in regards to that the first quarter was largely unaffected by the pandemic. If we think about shutdowns, they kind of started happening in March, really started hitting in full stride in April. So we had January, February, March of 2020, where a traditionally normal number of bankruptcy filings should have been filed at that point. And so we have those numbers where it's really 9 months that we saw an impact of the pandemic in 2020 when we're looking at those numbers. So if we jump to the next slide, it's also, we wanted to look at it and saying, all right, well, if we have these numbers that have dropped across the country, is there a trend here that's showing, where did it hit parts of the country stronger than others? And one of the good things that the US courts.gov site does is breaks down where the filings are happening by district. And so, if you look at a map of the district, we have, 11 districts, I believe, in total that the bankruptcy system breaks up their various filings over. And you can see that, 8, 9, and 10 are Western states, and then 1, 2, and 3 are up in the Northeast. So when we look at how the filings affected individual districts, it's pretty clear that 1, 2, and 3, the Northeast, saw the highest total drops in bankruptcies in any category, whereas 8, 9, 10, and 11, which is the West plus Florida, saw the least total number of drops. So again, if you're of a belief that there are filers waiting in the wings that are going to have to file at some point, they just haven't, the Northeast is probably going to see a bigger uptick in the number of bankruptcy filings than perhaps the West and Florida, just given that they saw a bigger dip in the total number of average filings over this period of time. And the rest of the country is kind of, a mixed bag of jurisdiction, but those were the two trends that really set out in terms of analyzing the country and understanding who took the biggest hits. Next slide, please. So it's great that we have some historical data that's telling us what happened. I think we all in our bankruptcy practices have experienced and felt that the number of filings are down, the number of clients are down, the prospective clients are down. We know that, but what does that tell us moving forward? And how do we tie this into what people's behaviors are? And what are we going to be looking for moving forward to understand when it is that people are at that point where they have to make a decision? Am I going to file bankruptcy or not? And am I going to seek help to do that? So the next sort of tying in piece that we look at this is Google search data. So Google, has been tracking data since its inception on all kinds of searches, so that we can go back and look and say, all right, well, what have the searches matched, or what's happened with people searching for bankruptcy or bankruptcy related products over time? And is there a correlation here? Is this something we can see that sort of matches up with our knowledge of what's happened in the last 18 months? So we broke up our bankruptcy searches into two main categories. The first I'll call educational searches, and the second are intent searches, where someone's seeking services. And very simply, we broke it down to, if somebody was searching in the search bar bankruptcy, just the word bankruptcy, what did that look like compared to somebody looking for bankruptcy attorney or bankruptcy lawyer? And obviously you get into a lot more different terms to look for and analyze with this, but if somebody's putting the word bankruptcy in, our analysis of that is they're looking to get educated on, what does bankruptcy mean? How do I file? Am I eligible? Should I consider it, kind of deal, versus, hey, it's a decision I've already made. I need to go find somebody to help me and do that. So as we look at these next few slides, this is the breakdown in terms of how we looked at this data. So looking in a more recent history, which is, January of 2018 until what was the middle of last month, we took a look at bankruptcy searches. So these are the searches of people looking for the word bankruptcy in general, more educating themselves on what bankruptcy means. And we've added in here approximate timelines for when some major milestones have happened in the last 18 months. So you could see March 2020, start of the pandemic or close to it. There's a big spike in the increase of number of searches for people looking for bankruptcy. It makes sense. People were scared, had no idea what's going on. What started off as hey, I'm going to stay home and watch the Tiger King and start drinking at 3:00 in the afternoon, quickly turned into a fearful situation where people understood this was going to, drag on for a long period of time. But interestingly, over each of the three stimulus programs that put money in people's pockets, the direct pays, you could see that right around the time that these checks arrived, there's a noticeable drop in the searches for bankruptcy. And that trend has continued over the last, year plus, showing a downward trend of people searching for the word bankruptcy. So again, we look at that line from January 2018 to March of 2020, a fairly stable line of people looking for bankruptcy services. And now we see that, we've had a steady decline in those searches with the, noticeable drops after each time somebody got stimulus money. Is that because everybody is in such great financial shape at this point that they don't need bankruptcy services? And it's a question that you have to answer for yourself. Are people in such great shape now that they're not going to need bankruptcy services, that the country is much healthier financially? Or is it because they haven't had to make that decision yet. And I think it's the latter. It's the latter of those two. And so you see, we have a lot of ground to make up in terms of people searching for bankruptcy as a generality. So we jump to the next slide. So you also see this, a very similar trend in bankruptcy attorney and bankruptcy lawyers. Again, fairly stable market. You see some spikes in here, a little bit here and there, but you draw a line across 2018 up until March, that you see a steady decline in the searches for bankruptcy attorney and bankruptcy lawyers. And so this matches what we would expect to see and what we are seeing in searches online for bankruptcy attorneys. So what does this mean? If we can jump to the next slide. So if the historically stable, typical number of filings is just delayed, we have 230,000 plus filings waiting in the wings, with 130,000 of those being Chapter 13s. And this is on top of any of the normal number of filings in any given year. And then add a third element to that. Do you believe the pandemic put people in a better financial position overall, or are they going to be hurting at some point? It just hasn't really materialized itself in a triggering way where they have to make a decision. And, that's where I think we have these things to understand. And if you believe that the tsunami wave is coming, it is not just, even if we had a normal year last year and we end up having a normal year this year, we've got a lot of filings to catch up on just to get back to that normal level. And if there's any impact that the pandemic had on people's necessity to file, that's going to add on top of it. That's the tsunami wave that you're looking at. So, what's that look like over the next couple of years? If it does start happening, what is that going to look like? Well, while not an apples to apples comparison, we do have some history that helps us to look at this and understand what can we anticipate. So we had the whole mortgage crisis not too long ago. And it sort of laid out, I think, over this 4-year period. 2007 and 8 was when it was really hitting, and 9 and 10, was when it was starting to resolve itself. But here you could see overall number of filings were higher back then, but look at the increases consistently over time. And there's really that 2-year period where there's 30 and 40% increases in the number of filings right after the crisis. And again, I understand this is not an apples to apples comparison, that there's been more government sort of response in at least some ways to the pandemic. But I think it is something that we can look at and draw some inferences from. If a previous financial crisis had its impact and it took 2 to 3 years to sort of get caught up into the backlog of cases, then I think we're looking at something similar here once the cases start to increase. So, when is it that we can expect it? What's our triggering points, and what do we look at? So let's look at the Google searches over history as well. So you can see, this is just a simple analysis. On the left-hand side, we have our intent searches. These are the ones where people are looking for lawyers. On the right-hand side is the educational searches. So the green line represents when the subprime crisis hit, and the red line, on the other side is the pandemic. So again, you can see a fairly consistent number of filings. Subprime increased over, in the years after, and then has sort of come down and stabilized into what was a new normal in terms of searches. And then you see a drop right after the pandemic and all of these. So again, we have this drop to make up for and to get back into some sort of regularity of getting back to our normal number of searches. And what's important about these searches are, I think these are our indicators that we need to be paying close attention to because it's essentially real time. So when we're looking and saying, when is it that we should start saying it's coming back? You don't want to get a quarterly report and find out, oh yeah, we had a 40% increase in filings in the last quarter. And I understand you'll have some feel for that in looking and talking to your peers and getting more phone calls and things like that. But you want to be ahead of this. You want to see when that curve starts to move and when it's time to pour some gasoline on this fire, understanding that, hey, the filings are coming. And that's really just paying attention to these Google search trends, which again are essentially real time, and showing us a consistent and market spike heading in the right direction, that people are looking for these types of services again. When's that going to happen? It's the trigger points. So, look at the next slide here. In the last, and this is an article from the middle of last month, and I know the number of this has increased, that, we have states that are dropping the federal unemployment benefits. They're saying, hey, it's been too rich for people. They need to be incentivized to get back to work. In Pennsylvania, where I am, there's a requirement, again, that you have to actively be looking for work, which had been set aside for some time. There's some other triggering points that I think are happening here. Forbearances. When this all started, the CARES Act gave, I think it was 6-month increment forbearances that were fairly automatic for everybody. So you could get up to 18 months of forbearance, essentially not paying your mortgage. That was further modified to say, all right, well, when your forbearance program ends, the bank cannot come back and lump sum require you to get caught up. They're going to have to add that to the end of your mortgage or change your payment structure in some way, shape, or form. But we've got a lot of people who have not been paying any mortgage payments for some considerable time now. This started in March of 2020. 18 months from that is September of this year. And there are people, they could have picked it up in between, but the people who's jumped on forbearance early, their time's running out in terms of the program that's going to give them protections and forbearance. And so you're going to start thinking, are people going to be looking at that and saying, well, I haven't been paying my mortgage payment. Are they in a position now to do it? Even if it is, a better term for them, or it's something that the bank is working with them on. It's the same thing for mortgage foreclosures. I was doing a little bit of research today because I've seen things all over the place, and I understand some state jurisdictions and are different. And, there's still a lot of uncertainty on this, but the FHFA expiration of the foreclosure moratorium is coming up June 30th of this year, less than 3 weeks away. And in addition to that, if people at the expiration of the foreclosure moratorium, want to take advantage of some of those protections, they had to have chosen forbearance as of February of this year. If they haven't done that, they don't get that protection at the end of the moratorium. So there are all these things that in the second half of this year are going to be the triggering points that I think are going to start having people take a hard look at their finances and understand, is this something that they can navigate without bankruptcy protections? I don't anticipate that there's going to be some significant stimulus program, again, that's going to put money in people's pockets. And I think people that were on the edge or were considering filing for bankruptcy at the beginning of all this are going to be back in that position again. And so you're going to have this demand that's going to be coming. And importantly, understanding when that is starting to trickle, or when that's starting to happen, is looking at those Google searches and understanding that that's something that essentially can be done in a very quick basis to have a look to see whether or not those searches are on the upward trend. So we're going to continue looking at all this data. We're going to continue analyzing it. We're going to continue to dissect this and challenge it in different ways to give us as much leadway as possible into when is this turn happening. But importantly, there are things that on the marketing side that Sean's going to talk about, that when this wave comes, if people can't find you, it doesn't do you any good. You have to be prepared that if there's a lot of people out there looking for bankruptcy services, that you're going to show up when they're looking for you. And a lot of these things, you can't just snap your fingers and turn it on overnight. There are several areas that you should consider doing right now to make sure that you're prepared for this. And some of your decisions in terms of how much you put into a spend or how aggressive you get in different areas can be driven by when you see this tail of searches going up. And that it's got a little bit of time behind it to tell you this isn't just a blip, it's starting to happen, and you're on the front end of it. So this is the point where I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and Sean's going to talk about, what is it that you can do to start preparing yourself for this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete. I think that data is great analysis, some great data. And we'll actually, since everyone made it this far on the webinar, I'm going to tell you about bonus number A. So bonus number A is that by participating in this webinar, we're going to do the research for you. So Pete mentioned there's things that you can do in terms of tracking the Google data, Google Trends, the different search terms. So by being part of this webinar, you're going to receive a monthly report from Acumen. And what we're going to do on a monthly basis is we're going to use the bankruptcy terms that we showed. We're also going to include other things like Chapter 13 searches, Chapter 7 searches, and really just kind of show you month over month the trends of the people looking for these type of things, whether it be educational or whether it be intent-based. And we're going to break the two of those out. In addition, we're also going to attach quarterly the actual filings number. So like Pete said, we don't want to wait on the quarterly report and then be kind of chasing our tails to catch up to it. So we're going to give you both. We're going to give you the month over month trends, and then we're also going to give you the quarterly data, and keeping our eye on those and keeping our ears to the ground as to what's happening out there, I think is really going to put you in a good position. So there is a million things that we can do from a marketing perspective. Everybody knows that. I'm sure you've spent all kinds of money and all different things. I really want to focus on today, what are the things that we're seeing most effective, not in just bankruptcy, but across all niches in terms of how people are finding people online. And also, what are some action things that you can do right now, steps that you can take right now in place that's going to position you for this wave when it comes. So there's this concept in marketing. I like to talk about this all the time, which is basically like, no trust. Okay. So people, in order for them to work with us, in order for them to come pre-positioned to buy from us, which is really what our goal is online, we have to build this like, no trust with our prospects prior. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about are actual things that you can do that can help build this like, no trust prior to the intent searches coming back. And that's really important, because right now people know in the back of their mind that yes, they might be facing a bankruptcy. They might have to deal with this. They might have to, put some of this stuff out there, but they're not ready to talk to somebody. They're not searching, I need a bankruptcy attorney, bankruptcy lawyer near me, or anything like that. So we're going to kind of break down the two areas. One thing, what can you do from an intent-based side, but also what can you do from a suggestive search-based side to put yourself out there, to increase your credibility, and really to, when people are ready to make the decision, the goal is to skip the whole intent-based search, right? And have them already have your name, already seen your reviews, already heard about your past experiences with customers, clients, know that you've been in business for 20 some years, and really have built that authority with them long before they're ever going to reach out and call. So we're going to talk about ways that we can do that. So first, I'm going to address some of the intent-based search things that we can do, and I'll kind of break those down for you. So some of you may know about this, some of you may not, but this year, all practice areas were approved for what's called local service area ads. Local service area ads by Google are something that, and I'm going to dive into each one as we go in. So real quick, just so the four things that we're going to cover are basically the local service area ads, Google AdWords, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, local service area pages and what that means, and then optimization of your Google My Business profile. Google My Business profile is one of the most important things that you can focus on to position yourself, because what I mean by the Google My Business profile is that when somebody says bankruptcy lawyer or bankruptcy attorney near me, many things are going to pop up, and we're going to break down what that search engine results page is going to look like. The SERP, I'm sure you've heard that term. We're going to break down what that looks like, but it's been proven that about 60% of the clicks that happen on any SERP for lawyer-based solutions and lawyer-based searches come from the maps. So when you see that map pop up and there's the top 3 position in the map, that's where the majority of the calls are coming from. People want to work with somebody that's close by. They're able to see your reviews. They're able to see a little bit about you. So again, that like, no trust. So how are we getting into that map, and how do we make sure that we're showing up? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of optimizing your Google My Business profile and things that relate to on-page stuff on your website and SEO that really boost those rankings. There is 20 spots. Every time someone does a bankruptcy attorney near me, there's 20 spots that will come up in that map ranking. The goal is to be in that top 3, because that top 3 sees the majority of all the clicks. So let's break it down, each one of these a little bit further. So local service ads, this is the newest thing that's in our space. So if you look to the right of this page, and we had to kind of condense it to get everything here, but this is a search engine results page. So this is the complete search engine results page. We did a term, this is up in Pittsburgh, we did a search for bankruptcy attorney near me. And at the very top here, we are seeing what's called the Google local service ads. Now, local service ads are newer in legal. They've been around for years in other service area industries, plumbers, kitchen remodelers, things like that. But for attorneys, they are newer this year. This past year, they were released and everyone became eligible. And how do they work? They work slightly different than your traditional Google ads, which is right below the bankruptcy, or right below these. Couple things. Number one, as you can see, they position for authority, right? So they're going to have your years in business, you're going to have your star rating, and they're popping right up. The other things that I love about Google local service ads are you do not pay for clicks, okay? The other one is a very pay per click, right? So you've probably heard, anywhere from $40 to maybe $100 to, depending on how competitive your market is, when you get a click on one of your Google ads, okay? Local service ads work a little different. Local service ads work on an engagement. So when you get a lead come through from a local service ad, you're actually going to reach out to them, you're going to talk to them, you're going to pre-qualify them. If it's a qualified lead of somebody that is seeking services and is in need, you are going to pay for that. If it is not, you can report that back to Google and say, listen, they were just looking for information about this, totally off topic, whatever it is, and you don't pay for that. So that's why I really like local service ads. They've been performing really well. They've actually been taking away from the effectiveness of Google ads because, as you can see, they pop up in the top, and people just like them. Again, they see the face, they see the stars, they see the years in business, and they like them. So how do I do Google local service ads? Well, it's not as much strategy, to be honest with you, that goes into the actual Google AdWords. Google AdWords, you have to make sure that your relevancy scores and all these different factors are in there to help with your positional ranking. With local service ads, you have to get approved for local service ads. So there's a process that you go through. I've walked several firms through this in different practice areas already. But you do need to get background checks. You do need to verify your license, and you need to do some things to get this Google verified badge. If you're interested in Google service ads, I highly recommend that you get approved for them. That way you can turn them on and off as you would like. But going through the approval process usually takes about 3 weeks. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction of how to get that. It's something you can absolutely do on your own in terms of getting that set up. So if you have any questions on that, just let me know. So past the local service ads, now we have our paid Google ads, right? So this is the next spot on the page, and that's this right here. These are going to be important. These are going to be more important when we see the intent-based search come back. Right now, there's a lot of people that are paying for their positions and paying for clicks and things like that. But again, if we're not seeing a huge tick, a lot of these ads, especially when people are running them incorrectly, people are looking for information on bankruptcy. Well, now they're clicking on this top 25 bankruptcy attorney, 25 years experience and things like that. They're going to click on the page, they're going to go to it, they're going to see a little bit of information, but they're going to realize that it's a lawyer webpage, right? And it's not a informational site that they were looking for. So they're going to bounce off of that page and they're going to go. Well, the challenge with that is that you just paid $47 for them to come to your page and realize that it's not what they're looking for. So until the intent-based searches are back up, I'm not saying completely shut these off, but you really have to watch your budget on these right now. And that's kind of what we've done with a lot of our customers. We'll keep them running. We want to keep our relevance. We want to make sure that we're still showing, but at the same time, we're going to dial these in to really make sure that we're only catching the intent-based search, not all of the potential educational searches that could be coming through on those. The next thing here, and again, this is one of the most important things, is your top 3 of the MAP rankings. This is the Google My Business. And again, people have claimed their Google My Business location, they get their postcard in the mail, they do that, and they're like, okay, that's it. There is so much that you can do to optimize these, both on page and off page, that the more that you do to optimize them, the more that you post, the more that you respond to reviews, the more that you get reviews, the more that you tie things back to your website. So your local service area pages and other things that you're going to do on your website are tied to this Google My Business profile. You are going to boost that up. What's really cool about this is we always tell people to focus in on about a 13-mile radius. One of the other offers that you're going to get at the end of this presentation is a complete assessment of your online web presence. So we can kind of dive in and show you what we're seeing, what your page speeds are like on your website, where there's some deficiencies and things like that. One thing that we do and include in that is these really cool rank maps, right? So the rank map is going to pop up and I can show you exactly what position you rank for when someone searches bankruptcy attorney near me from your office location. And we'll start with a center pinpoint. And then around that pinpoint, you're going to have 1 mile radius dots. A lot of maps that we see in the very beginning might have all red on them. All red means that you are not showing in the top 20, even if you are making that search from within your office. What that means is that we just don't have an optimized Google My Business location. We may have not even claimed it. It can mean a lot of things, but we're going to make sure that those are optimized and we're really focusing on those. Again, in the assessment that we do, we're going to include some tips and tricks of some things that you can do on your own. And then there is obviously more things that we can do, that other marketing companies can do, that can really help bolster that up for you. And then the last piece, which everybody knows, is obviously the top organic search. Top organic search, or anywhere in the organic search, is always a challenge in the rankings. And let me show you why. So when I pulled this up, we can see, this is the top organic search. So these are the top 3 things that we're finding. These are all directory sites. That's very common that you're going to see. So how do we break into these? How do we break into these directory sites and these top organic page rankings? And that's what I mean by local service area pages. You got to remember, Google is just a set of algorithms that's matching search data with what your website is telling and what you're putting out there. So, people are looking to optimize, hey, Philadelphia bankruptcy attorney near me. And it's like, hey, optimize for Philadelphia and things like that. Well, obviously within Philadelphia, there's a lot of subdivisions, sub-cities. There's a lot of suburbs, so what about King of Prussia? What about Delaware County? What about all these other areas? Well, we can create what are called local service area pages, in which the metadata description, the actual page title, all the information on the page and everything is matching to the search of a bankruptcy attorney in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, or in a specific location. By doing this, this is one way that we can pop into this first page rankings. I like to call them pop rankings, but basically it's telling Google, listen, someone searched this specific term and this page is giving information exactly on what it is that they're searching for. So it's that matchup of the intent. It's one of the fastest ways that you can get ranked on the first page, or at least in the top couple pages on the organic side. So those are all things that you can do from an intent-based side. But what are some of the things that we can do from a suggestive search? And I put in a couple things here. We're really going to focus on the social media advertising because we're really focused on what we can do online right now. But just in traditional suggestive search, you have billboards, you have radio ads, you have print ads, television commercials, different things that you've done in the past and things that you still see people doing. And basically what we're saying is that we're putting our information out there. We're telling them that we can help them with this potential problem that they may have right now, they may have in the future. We're positioning ourselves. We're talking about past results. I mean, you can't drive down 95 in Florida without seeing multiple billboards from personal injury attorneys about exactly how much money they got their clients and things like that, right? So we're going to do all that and do that. But one thing that I always tell all of my clients is that there's a huge opportunity. There's a huge branding opportunity that gets missed when people are like, well, I don't think my services will sell on Facebook, or I don't think my services, people aren't looking for a lawyer on Instagram and things like that. You're right. They're not going to Instagram to search out for a lawyer. But if I am strategic and showing my ads and showing them within a specific location, targeted age groups and things like that, we are going to put it out there, just like we put a billboard out there. And I always tell people, if you're willing to spend money on a billboard, you should definitely be willing to spend money on social media ads, because half the people that are driving past your billboard are actually looking at Facebook while they're driving down the road. So there's a huge missed opportunity. The other thing that I always tell people is that if you think about the cost, so you always talk about the cost per 1,000 impressions, for 1,000 eyes to get on your brand, your logo, whatever it is, your message. What is the cost for that? So if you look at things like print ads, radio ads, billboards, traditional forms of suggestive search advertising, upwards of $32 per 1,000 impressions. Okay, so anywhere between $10 to $32, let's call it, ranging depending on the type of media. The average cost for 1,000 impressions on Facebook is going to be less than $1. So what I tell people all the time is that two things. Number one, yes, you want to advertise because your people are on Facebook. If you look at the trends, and this would be a whole different webinar, but if you look at the trends of social media usage and things like that post the pandemic, it's astronomical, the amount of time that people are actually spending on these apps and things like that. So if that's where they are, that's where we want to show ads, and that's where we want to position ourselves. So for the topic of today, we're going to focus on Facebook and Instagram ads. That's where people are spending the most time. And I'm going to give you 3 ideas on 3 different types of ad sets that you can do that are going to really help, drive your awareness and really help build this like, no trust. Because again, these are all things that we can be doing pre these intent searches coming back to position ourselves to have them skip the intent search altogether. I would love a world where they've already downloaded your document. They're already in your email follow-up funnel. They're already getting information from you. They've seen you. And then that moment comes where it's like, hey, I have no other option. I need to speak to somebody. You are there. You are pre-positioned as the expert. They will make the phone call. Data shows that across the board. You will be the first phone call. So let's talk about these 3 types of ad sets. One of my favorite is a top of the funnel asset. People love information. They want to come. Top of the funnel assets are really going to work for both people that are in the educational side, but they're also going to work for people that are near that intent-based search side. So, how do we position ourselves? We're going to offer a free downloadable asset, whether it be a book, whether it be an ebook, a guide, infographics, all of these things work. It's not really, you want to have the information in the asset be topical. So one of the things that I would suggest is, how is the pandemic going to affect bankruptcy filings in 2021 and later 2021, something like that, right? That's going to catch someone's eye. That's going to make them download that. That's going to bring them into our funnel and allow us to effectively market to them, stay top of mind with them, and make sure that when they're ready to make that purchase decision, they are coming to us when they do that. This is one of the best ways to build your like, no trust authority. And again, they're just going to be pre-positioned to come back and see us. Top of the funnel assets are one of the, people don't like just booking with a law firm. Like, we live in a different world today. The idea of picking up the phone, how many people, ordered their lunch today, but they did it on an app. We don't even like calling restaurants to order food anymore. We do it from our DoorDash and our apps and things like that. So this allows people to engage. It allows you to engage with them prior to a phone call, prior to any type of consultation or anything happening. So this is really important, something that I would definitely consider incorporating to get your brand out there, to position yourself for when this is coming. The next thing that we see, this is actually working across the board right now in legal. So personal injury law, bankruptcy law, even criminal law, we're seeing this work, are what's called send message campaigns. So send message campaigns are a little bit different. In Facebook and Instagram, you have the intent of the campaign. So the intent might be just to get page likes. The intent might be brand awareness. The intent could be conversion. Conversion campaigns are more, hey, book on my calendar and let's talk. But one of the newer ones that they came out with are what's called these send message campaigns. And what a send message campaign does is allows you to run an ad set. So you're talking about, hey, we're here, we have 25 years experience in doing bankruptcy in this service area, in this specific area, and things like that. So then these ads are going to start to show. And simply what they allow the prospect to do is engage with us. So when they click on the ad, rather than ask for their name, phone number, email, time to call back, booking calendars, all these type of things, it's just going to pop up the Facebook Messenger window. And they are allowed to engage with your law firm. So they can send you a quick message. And they might say, hey, listen, what's the difference between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13? Well, maybe you already have a pre-created asset that you would send them back real quick and say, hey, here's a little guide that breaks down the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. If you have any further questions, we would like to talk to you about this. We'd love to jump on a call. So doing things like that. And I always say this taps into the psychology of who we are today. We are a text message society. If I can get the information, Pete and I are partners, we communicate a lot. If I can send him a short text message and he can text message me back, we don't have to book calls. We don't have to clog up our schedule. We don't have to do this, right? We're all about this fast information. Twitter has changed our minds, right? We don't like to read long things. We want quick answers, quick things. So this just taps into the human psychology and human behavior a little bit and allows them to engage when they otherwise would not have engaged with your firm. So again, this is one of the simplest ad sets to run. It's really about just setting up your targeting. It's about setting up your hook on your ad, getting them to hit that send message button. But these are very, very simple ad sets to run. So I highly recommend, from a brand awareness standpoint, whether it's now, post-pandemic, just in general, this is definitely an ad that you're going to run. Because think about it. It's a digital billboard that's showing up in people's things that's saying, hey, if you have a quick question, ask me. So it's even more effective than any billboard or any other print advertising that you could do. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is retargeting. Retargeting is really, really important, both on page and off page. So there's two forms of retargeting. One is someone comes on Facebook. Let's say we put out a video and we're talking a little bit about your firm. We're talking, it's a testimonial ad. These work really, really well. People like to hear past results. So it's a testimonial. It's a short video where someone's talking. If someone engages with that video for a certain period of time, the Facebook algorithm gives me that data to say, hey, let's retarget this person with other ads. They're looking for more information. There's a potential here. They might have a potential bankruptcy coming or whatever it is. There's a potential need for my service. Let me retarget these people. Two things there. Number one, when I'm capturing audience through a video view or through a different method like that, it is pennies on the dollar compared to me trying to capture them with a conversion ad. If I'm running an ad that says book a call here now and do this, that ad's going to cost me a lot more to show than a simple video view ad. So if I have them watch a video view ad first, and then I retarget with them with a conversion ad, I'm not competing with all of the Facebook, all the other marketers on Facebook. They're in my own funnel now. They're in my own retargeting group. So now I can run conversions ads at a fraction of the cost that if I was running them against cold traffic. So that's one way that retargeting really works. The other thing that I tell people is that there's a staggering statistic that says 80% of all your website visitors that ever visit your website, that ever come to a landing page, anything, take zero action. So that means that, you're spending money on SEO, you spent money on a great looking website, you're ranking the website, you're doing all these things, but most of the people that you're driving are not taking any action. They're coming, they're looking, they're checking different pages. We can measure the bounce rates. We can do all this. We can do things to optimize on site to try to keep them there longer. But the reality is that no matter what we do, roughly about 80% of those people are going to leave and not make an engagement. Well, the beauty of retargeting is that when they drop that pixel, when they come to your page and then they pick up that pixel, especially now, obviously there's some things with the Apple iOS changes and Apple devices and things like that make this a little bit more complicated. But someone searching it from a PC, from their computer they're going to pick up that pixel and we're going to be able to retarget them. So if they came to your website or they downloaded something or they took other engagement that was off social media, we can now become what I like to call omnipresent in their world. And that just means that, hey, I go on Instagram later that night, that law firm whose webpage I checked out earlier popped up in my Instagram. Then I went on Facebook and I saw a 5-star review about this law firm that I just researched. Then 3 days later, I get an ad that shows, hey, if you're, considering if you're concerned about losing your home or this, that, or the other thing or something like that, here's some information, right? We can't target the hardship. We can't say, call us now and do this, but we can provide information about what they can do and actions that they can take and things like that. So retargeting, if you don't do anything in terms of Facebook, Instagram, and things like that, you absolutely want to set up a retargeting campaign because, again, you're spending money in other areas. You're spending money on local service ads, on Google ads, on all these other things. Why not, for pennies on the dollar, retarget them on the place where, quite frankly, they are spending the most time, which is Facebook and Instagram? All right, so that kind of covers a lot of the things that we can do. And then with that, I want to jump into the 2 special offers. I see most of you have made it to the end here, so I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. A replay of this will be sent out, replay of the slides and everything like that. If you have any questions, Pete and I will make ourselves available. But let's jump into what we can do for you here. So one of the things that we like to do is this free web presence assessment. This isn't some type of cheesy where we just run you through a tool and you get a thing that says, hey, your page score is this, that, or the other thing. This is a true deep dive assessment. My director of digital marketing will actually go in, look at your web, look at your Google My Business profile, look at any type of advertising, all publicly available information. We don't need any passcodes or anything like that to perform this assessment. And then really dive into what is your positional ranking on these GMB maps? Why are we seeing that, it's all red, maybe because name, address, and phone number is not consistent or something like that, and you're being penalized by Google. So sometimes there's actually just a penalty from Google, and that's why you're not ranking. So those are things that we can quickly address and give feedback on. So usually the way that these work is they're about a 15 to 20-minute assessment. And what we do is we just record a simple, it's called a Loom recording. And basically you'll see my director of marketing, Mark Perna, he's going to jump in there, and then we'll call up your website, we'll call up your Google My Business listing, and then we'll dive into the metadata and everything that's behind. And we'll really kind of just show you, hey, this is what's going on with it. Here's some things that you can take on your own real quick. And obviously, if you'd like to talk about, other ways that we could potentially help you, then we'd be happy to jump on and have a further discussion about ways that we can help you. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the other thing that we are going to do is everybody that signed up for this webinar, you're going to get a free monthly and quarterly report. This is going to be about all the trend data. So this is, rather than you go and try to figure out how to come up with the Google searches month over month, we're just going to provide the data to you. And then if we're seeing anything, if we see anything that jumps out, certain areas of the country that might have opened up sooner than others and things like that, we're going to give some insights on that data. So every month you are going to receive the Google search data, and every quarter you will see the Google search data in addition to the actual filings data, the true filings data. So we believe that if we track these, we're going to be able to see that, hey, the intent searches are coming back. What's that going to do? That's going to allow us to say, hey, let's beef up our Google ads. Let's do this. It's just going to let the data help us make decisions on how we want to do our marketing efforts, where we want to spend the money, and what's going to be the best return on investment. Right now, doing things like pre-positioning yourself, building out the like, no, trust, creating these funnels, doing the things on social media, I would highly recommend as one of the first things that you want to start. The other thing is make sure your firm is at least approved for the LSAs. If you have a question about that, we can absolutely help you with that. And then lastly, make sure that your Google My Business at least has the base level of optimization. For the most part, if you have the base level of optimization, you will show in the map ranks. And then we can obviously show you tips and tricks on how to continuously grow and improve those map ranks. So with that, Pete, did you have anything else that you want to add here?
Now, the only other thing that we do for a lot of our clients that's effective, and this becomes relevant once the filings come back, is direct mail services as well. If it's something you've ever considered, that's something that we're more than experienced in and happy to talk to you about as well. Can explain more how that works for some of our clients.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, that's a great point, Pete. And I think that matches up nicely with the intent-based stuff as well, because that's going to be with the filings coming back, then obviously the direct mail is going to be very effective. So again, thank you so much for your time. I know everyone's schedules are really, really busy. I appreciate you spending this time with us. My email's here, Pete's email's here. If you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out to either of us. Post this, you are going to get a follow-up email that's going to give you a link to get that free assessment. There is absolutely no commitment whatsoever. Please take advantage of the free assessment. It's our way of kind of showing you that we stand behind what we talk about, and we like to take very data-driven approaches. So prior to us even ever working together, if we ever did work together in the future, we put everybody through these assessments anyway. So take advantage of that, get a good snapshot of where you're at. And if you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Thank you again. Make it a great rest of your day. Pete, thank you so much for your contribution on this. And we'll be in touch with everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.